Hello, and thank you for joining us here today. I'd like to acknowledge that we are here on Treaty 6 territory, and I'd also, of course, like to acknowledge the Métis people of Alberta who also share a very deep connection with this land. Today, I'm joined by Janis Isaman and Brittany Anderson. They are two small business owners whose businesses are closed and have concerns about the current lack of support for their businesses from this government. But before we hear from them, I'd like to say a few words. Just last Friday, Statistics Canada released their jobs report, and it showed the devastation to our economy from this pandemic. More than 360,000 jobs have been lost in Alberta since it started, and another 220,000 Albertans who may have kept their jobs but worked significantly reduced hours or no hours at all. In total, over 500,000 Albertans have lost income, significant amounts of income, due to this pandemic. And the pandemic has hit small businesses and their employees the hardest. According to StatsCan, employment in firms of 100 employees or more declined by 13%. Employment in businesses between 20 and 99 employees declined by 25%. And for businesses with less than 20 employees, their employment declined by 30%. These figures are staggering. These small businesses and the people they employ are struggling. But up to now, Premier Jason Kenney and his UCP government have not done nearly enough to help. Based on the government's relaunch plans, many businesses can start reopening in 2 days. But many do not have the resources or support that they need. Yesterday, we learned that the after-the-fact scramble to put out vague guidelines left more questions than answers. And the one thing that we do know is that most small businesses simply were not given enough notice or time to put in place those rules in time to open. Now, you may recall that we called for this work to be done weeks ago. But beyond rules, these small businesses also need actual financial support. A recent survey by Restaurants Canada found 70% of respondents have serious concerns about managing expenses like rent and vendor payments over the next 3 months. The survey also showed that about 20% of independent restaurants are dealing with a landlord who is unwilling to provide any type of rent relief. Similarly, a survey by the Canadian Federation of Independent Business found that access to PPE is among the top concerns for small business owners. And I'm hearing these same concerns every day from small business owners that we talk to. Many are struggling to make ends meet and have more questions than answers when it comes to how they reopen their business. As a result, many have chosen not to open because they aren't sure if they can do it safely. In other cases, they simply can't afford to do it safely right now. The cost of reopening may be greater in their cases than the benefit of reopening. So it's 2 days until this reopening plan takes effect, and businesses still have no recommended source for acquiring PPE or help paying for it. Overall, this plan is underdeveloped, unfunded, and leaves Albertans unprepared. Small businesses are being hung out to dry because the government couldn't be bothered to do their homework in advance. And that's why today we are calling on the UCP government to support these small businesses who are trying to reopen. In particular, they need to provide grants for small businesses to cover expenses related to reopening their businesses. This includes $5,000 for physical business improvements to comply with public health orders, $5,000 for startup-related costs for the retail and services sector, or $10,000 for startup-related costs for the hospitality sector. We've heard that many small businesses know that they'll have to redesign their space in order to comply with public health orders. This is a significant challenge, particularly with most small businesses desperate for cash. For example, a hair salon where they need to install plexiglass between chairs in order to protect customers and their staff. And we've also heard from small businesses who are desperate for cash as they reopen. But in order to successfully start up, they will have higher than anticipated expenses in order to comply with a variety of public health orders or recommendations or suggestions, depending on how they are characterized. For example, Businesses may need to hire additional cleaners to regularly disinfect the premises. And because for instance, what might have been daily cleaning activity pre-COVID might turn into something that needs to happen multiple times a day. Indeed, we know that that will definitely be the case. In addition, as we said, according to the guidelines released yesterday, many will need to find and purchase PPE, not only for their staff, but potentially for their customers. We're also hearing that many small businesses in the hospitality sector are facing the same high startup costs as other small businesses, but have additional costs for inventory. This is a particular concern for restaurants who will need to require more food. And that's why our proposal provides an extra $5,000 for those. These businesses lost the bulk of their revenue during the shutdown. And as they start up again, they will need to, as I've said, require inventory, increase cleaning, and purchase PPE, all while operating at 50% capacity. And not only will small businesses need help with the cost for PPE, as I've said, they will need help sourcing them. And that's why our government needs to create a PPE acquisition plan. There is no body or organization better placed to gather up and find PPE than the government of Alberta. And so they should be focused on doing this work. It should be done through a verified vendor program for PPE, so small businesses know which producers of PPE are legitimate, and creating quality product and providing a portal for small business owners. This is a virtual zero cost to government, but would be enormously beneficial to small businesses who don't have expertise in sourcing PPE and take risk out of purchasing PPE. And while these steps will help with reopening, we also know that more help may still be required. Small businesses still have ongoing costs they can't afford, especially if they are in the later stages of the relaunch plan and can't open their doors for weeks or even months. Now, we know the federal government came forward with the Canada Emergency Commercial Rent Assistance Program. I'm not going to tell you what that sounds like in terms of its initials. Let's just call it the Federal Rent Assistance Program. However, we are hearing from small business owners who are having a great deal of trouble accessing the rent subsidy program. Either they don't qualify due to restrictive eligibility criteria, or landlords are simply refusing to participate. Another survey from CFIB found that 40% of landlord members are not interested in the federal rent program, while a third are unsure and only a quarter plan to even apply. In the end, many small businesses will struggle to pay rent, threatening their very existence as a business. And let me tell you, with the hundreds and hundreds of small business owners that we have been consulting with, we know that rent is a huge issue. And so this is unacceptable. Now, this program was negotiated in conjunction with the provinces and the federal government. So our Premier, Jason Kenney, needs to get back to the table to renegotiate what is, in essence, a failed program for small business owners. Too many are falling through the cracks, as I've said, putting their businesses and the huge number of jobs that they create in jeopardy. And if the federal government won't help and won't change the rules, then our provincial government needs to step in and finally listen to small business owners and provide them some form of meaningful rent relief. Now, while rent can be the bulk of ongoing costs, it actually isn't even the whole picture. Many small business owners are still also struggling with insurance and utility costs. So we are renewing the previous call we've already made for the UCP to provide for a 50% reduction in insurance premiums until December 31st, 2020. Many businesses are closed right now, and yet they're still paying for liability coverage through their insurance provider. It makes no sense. Continuing to pay for insurance like this can be a massive ongoing expense for many business owners. But with nobody actually in those businesses, the liability is kind of not there. So it isn't fair to the business owners. The government has the authority to mandate this reduction. Doing so would put money back in the pockets of these business owners and help them with the additional costs that will be necessary when they turn to reopening. On top of this, we are also renewing our call for utility bill relief for both small businesses medium-sized businesses, and consumers. So far, the UCP has only offered deferrals, i.e. more debt down the line. But it's not enough. It only adds, as I said, to the debt. And providing utility bill relief is not unprecedented. BC has forgiven bills for small businesses for 3 months, and Ontario has suspended peak hour pricing. So if we want to reignite our economy, we need to support small businesses. We need to be putting cash in their hands as quickly as we can, because we know that's the best way to do this. I've been hearing from small businesses every day who need support in order to reopen their doors. And for those who can't reopen right away, they need help weathering the storm. Without it, we won't have an economy to reopen or jobs for people to return to. So we need to be smart about how to reopen our economy and do it in a way that protects the health of all Albertans. That means supporting businesses so they have the resources they need to stay afloat and keep everyone safe. We need to get this right the first time, because every time we try to do it again, we will have more costs being sustained by our job creators across the province. We know 647,000 people in Alberta are employed by small businesses. That's over a third of working Albertans, which is why it is so surprising that this government has done so little so far to support these businesses. We need the Premier and his government to do better. Albertans need the Premier and his government to do better. This is our proposal. Thank you. Now I'll hand it over to Janis Isaman to say a few words.
Janis, we may need you to start over. I think you're on mute.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. My name is Janis Isaman, and I'm the owner of a small boutique fitness brand on 17th Avenue in Calgary named My Body Couture. I'm a micro business, so I employ under 4 people. It's a very small company, which puts me at larger than average exposure to what has happened. So from the outset, my physical space was closed and mandated to be closed on March 17th. I also work in an outside space that was mandated to be closed on March 16th. So while I'm hearing conversations of restarting the economy and restarting businesses, we have forgotten that those of us who own these kind of small businesses have already weathered this for 2 months. So this is not behind me by any stretch of the imagination. My company has received $0, zero in support. So although we have support programs that are federal or provincial, I have received nothing. I've called multiple accountants. I've looked for many different ways to make this happen, and short of literally lying to get one of these support programs, I'm not eligible for any of them. I have an incorporated business, but I do not compensate myself by way of T4. I've loaned my own business a lot of money to get started, and therefore what I'm getting back is not by way of a T4. So I was very hopeful when the rent support program announcement was made prior to May rent being due. I contacted my landlord, and they're not willing at this point to move that program forward. This was devastating. I don't have huge rent bills. I have 400 square feet. But at this point, that's the only program that I was even potentially eligible for. My landlord is a $9 billion company, according to their website. I have been paying my corporate insurance. I have been paying my bills in every direction to keep my business afloat. The first 4 to 6 weeks of this pandemic, I worked 18-hour days, and I have a child at home that I was supposed to also be schooling. So I am under the water, kicking my legs as fast as I can to pay a $9 billion company full rent to pay all of my insurance, because that's a requirement of my lease. So their response to the rent program was to tell us that they were looking into it and to remind us that we had to maintain our corporate insurance. I've reached out to my landlord with multiple emails to see if we could potentially, reduce operating costs, reduce something. Anything at this point would help me, because the week that I was closed, the revenue drop was substantial because I work in a business that's private, one-to-one, where I have face-to-face contact with my client. We talk about pivoting our businesses, and believe me, I've tried, but I'm a person of one, and I have 2 staff underneath me that I'm also supporting. But I don't have an IT department to kind of pivot my business online. I don't have big resources. And the kind of pivots that we're talking about would take any normal business months to execute properly. I sat at my desk, I got it done. I made sure that all of my clients were taken care of. I work in the health and fitness industry where I am helping promote the health, longevity, and just general goodwill of Albertans so that we don't have to use the health system, so that we're not running to different practitioners. I'm helping them work out and stay healthy and fit. I was closed by the government. The government has given $0 of support to my business. So although we're in the conversations about the restart phase, which I think is very important, we can't forget that the person and the people who have completely borne this cost in many cases are the small business owners themselves. So although I was closed by the government, I can be fined by the government. The government has not come forward with any mandates or clear picture of how I am going to make it through this other than my own personal resources, strength, and resiliency. I grew up on a farm, and thank God for that, because my work ethic is literally the only assistance that I have. So thank you to my parents for teaching me to work those long, long days and doing whatever it takes. But that's not what should have to be done here. I'm seeing that people who had employment prior to this are, without any single questions being asked, able to access the CEBA. They don't have to come up with lengthy reports of how they've lost their personal income. They don't have to submit documentation the way that businesses do to get very minor assistance. A business my size, a few $1,000s a month is helpful. When we talk about reopening, I've literally been living partially on cash flow from selling product. It's good that I've been able to do that. But how am I going to go back into that business now with a supremely diminished resource? And that's all I have. So once I've sold all of that inventory, I don't have anybody helping me replenish that inventory, restock that. I heard Rachel mention the insurance premiums. The building that I work in has been literally locked with signs on the outside saying, per Alberta Health Services, no members of the general public may enter this building. As already mentioned, my landlord sent out a notice company-wide to everybody who rents in the building to remind us that we needed to pay our $5 million corporate liability insurance. There's no one even in the building. Nobody is suing me. Nobody is suing them. That is not their fault. It is in my lease, and I understand their need to protect themselves. But as Rachel already mentioned, there's zero possibility that anybody from March 16th or 17th, when that mandate came through, until the day that I open, there's zero possibility that anybody is suing me or my business for any space liability issues, as they're not allowed in the building. The communication to businesses and how we reopen has simply been lacking. We're getting all of our information by way of press conference. Nobody has ever emailed me or mailed me a letter. Nobody has explained what phase I'm in. My zoning is as phase 3, a fitness business. I provide one-to-one service. Supposedly, a bunch of one-to-one services are opening tomorrow. I've heard that I might be able to petition the government. I have emailed multiple people to find out who I petitioned to. How is this procedure done? What are the consequences? And what are the necessities that I need to actually provide to my clients and to myself and to my staff in order to be safe? It's very unclear. I've seen some vague guidelines, but I worry that I won't be able to meet them and that I will get fined. That's a huge concern, because in my business, I've heard of multiple businesses being open when they shouldn't and getting fined. So the fitness industry is kind of top of that heap. So I can't afford, certainly at this point, to do something wrong. I'm afraid of making a misstep. But I'm also concerned about what my business looks like. I do see people one-to-one, so that's not a concern. But I also tend to see clients back-to-back. Do I now have to clean for half an hour? Do I have to clean every surface after they leave, none of this has actually been personally communicated to me. I'm not even sure if I am a personal service business or if I actually am a Zone 3 gym. Nobody's really helping any small business answer any of these questions or giving us a place that we can actually speak one-to-one and get some private consultation on how we might move forward with this. As well, we're being asked to pay full taxes, full ops costs, full everything. And if my landlord has opted out of the rent program, I've still paid full rent. So at a time when my revenue has dipped substantially and I've done whatever it has taken to keep on my feet and pay my bills, this is not behind me. This is still very much happening here and now. The things that Rachel and her team have put forward in terms of ways that we can restart are so promising to me. I do need a startup grant. I need something to help me as somebody who did put a lot of effort into remaining on my feet, who is planning to reopen. I need some cash in my hand. It's not going to make up for the 2 months that I've already been closed, and who knows how much longer I am going to be closed, because if I actually am zone phase 3, it's a very unclear opening deadline. So this isn't behind me. I need to replenish my stock. I need to know that my costs are not going up. The only thing that my landlord has offered me is a 2-month rent deferral where I did not pay in April and May, but I would restart paying that in June. I opted out of that because all that does is build debt.
Thank you,
So
Janis.
knowing that I have to pay full expenses the entire time is just a very heavy burden.
Thank you so much, Janis. I'm conscious of the time because I know you have another appointment. So I just wanted to bring your attention to the time right now. Yeah, thank you so much for your words. We'll also hear from Brittany, our second guest today.
Thank you, Ms. Notley, and thank you for inviting me to speak today. Hello to everyone. My name is Brittany Anderson, and I am the co-founder of Laser City. Our products include laser tag, mini paintball, virtual reality, and esports. So we are in the business of having fun. And we do a ton of birthday parties and sports team wrap-ups, corporate events, that kind of work. My partner and I opened this business about 7 years ago. And between our Edmonton location and our Calgary location, we employ around 35 people. So to talk about how COVID has affected our business, I'll take us back to March, which was a very busy month for us, and everything was going great. But around mid-March, everything changed very quickly. We went from prepping for our busiest weekend of the year to about 150 party cancellations to being closed, all in a 7-day period. It was actually more than 150 party cancellations, but after that point, I just stopped keeping track. So the day that the government mandated that we closed, it was a pretty tough day. Besides just closing our entire business, making countless phone calls to postpone parties and other special events, I had the task of laying off our part-time team. And for those of you who've never laid off anyone before, you have to go through each staff member one by one and click a button next to their name to finalize it. And you just look at your employee's name as you do that, and you just hope that they're going to be okay. I laid off 27 people that day. I'm really proud of the jobs that we've created and the team that we've built over the years, and I didn't ever think that I'd be in the position where I had to lay off my entire part-time team all at once. I'm excited to eventually open so I can bring them all back, but yeah, that was pretty hard. And I understand that we had to close. Basically, our business is bringing together large groups of people to have a fun time, and that is not an activity that you can do during a pandemic. So it's the safe choice, and it's absolutely the right choice for us to be closed at this moment. But it doesn't make dealing with any of this less hard. And the past couple months have been hard. Lots of sleepless nights, super high anxiety, a ton of doubt, lots of questions. My entire life is tied up in this business, so all of this weighs so heavily on my shoulders. Now, unlike Janis, we are lucky and we have received some support. We are absolutely so grateful for the 75% wage subsidy, and that's how we've been able to keep our full-time team working with us. We went to them once we realized that the shutdown wasn't just going to be a few weeks, it's going to be much longer than that. And we asked them, how are we going to make revenue? How are we going to survive this, being that our business is so much in person? So we had to find ways to kind of turn our in-person products into an online event, something that you can do at home. So our staff has helped us create, in Edmonton, for instance, we're now renting out our VR headsets so people can play at home. And we're just about to launch our online Minecraft day camps and do virtual birthday parties with people. So we're trying to do things online to bring in some revenue while everything's closed down. So we're seeing light at the end of the tunnel, but we need help getting there. I don't know anyone in the business community that can go without revenue for 6 months without any help. And that's the situation that we're in and other people in our industry are in. The biggest area that we need help with is rent. It's been almost 2 months since we've shut our doors. That's 2 rental periods that we've gone through, and we still don't have a rent subsidy program that works. So for one, the program straight up isn't open yet. So even if your landlords want to apply for it, they can't. This is just taking way too long. For us, and I think similar to Janis as well, our landlords are large investment institutions. And for us, because they don't have a traditional mortgage on our property, they aren't eligible for the current program. So we're not sure where that is going to leave us. And at this point, the subsidy program is slated to end in June. We will not be open in June. And I'm guessing that we won't be open in any meaningful way until probably September. So I'd like to see this program extended. And then the other thing that isn't seen in Alberta, which we're seeing in a lot of other provinces, is an eviction ban for commercial tenants. We're, again, very lucky and thankful that our landlords are communicating with us and talking to us, but I know that's not the same case with a lot of my friends who own businesses who are being threatened with eviction right now, and it's just not fair. I did note that Rachel mentioned that there is a grant proposed for businesses for purchasing PPE and opening up. That would be so helpful. This is going to be such an unprecedented opening once we're allowed to do it, and any help would be absolutely amazing. I guess to close, I just want to say I'm incredibly determined and I'm highly optimistic that our company is going to make it through this. I'm hoping a lot of people rent our VR rentals and sign up for our day camps online so that I can bring people back to work sooner than later. But I know I can't do this alone, and I need the government to act fast with these changes so that we don't slip through the cracks. Thanks.
Thank you so much for those comments, both of you.
Thanks, folks. We'll turn to questions from the phone lines shortly, but first I've got one coming in by text from Lisa Johnson of Post Media. For either of our business owners, Janis or Ashley, do you know what the cost, or do you have an estimate of the cost of implementing some of the guidelines, like gathering PPE or installing barriers or making any kind of modifications for your businesses?
Let's go to Brittany on that one.
I haven't spent too much time looking into it yet. We've got 40,000 square feet between the 2 locations, so it's going to be a lot of money, but because we're not probably slated to open until September, I haven't calculated the numbers as of yet.
Janis, do you have a quick answer to that, or have you not had a chance to look into it yet? Sorry,
Janis, you're on mute again.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yeah, mine is actually going to be very minimal on that front because, I only work one-on-one with people, so I'm not going to have to install barriers or do anything. It's literally a cleaning supply and time cost. So in my case, it's more of a time barrier versus a cost barrier.
Thanks. Okay.
Thank you. We'll go to the phone lines now. A reminder, if you're calling in, you can press *9 to ask a question or use the raise hand function if you've logged in through Zoom. We will go to our first caller. As soon as you hear that your line is unmuted, please state your name and affiliation.
Lisa McGregor, Global Edmonton.
Go ahead, Lisa.
Thank you. I was just wondering, from a lot of the businesses I spoke to yesterday, the ones that are choosing not to reopen have said that the subsidies are not enough, and when they weigh things out with the risk versus reward, it just seems like there's no dollar amount that is going to be enough to be able to fully kind of pull the plug or open up their business fully. What do you say to those businesses? Because it just doesn't seem like, what's going to be enough to be able to go forward completely and keep their business alive? Because are you confident that these grants will be enough, especially for those larger businesses?
Well, I think it definitely, it will vary by business, of course. But what we know right now is, like, so for instance, in the hospitality sector, if if they go forward and they make massive investments to increase their inventory, and then we have to pull back, or they don't know how many people are going to come out to access their business, then there's a lot of risk associated with that as well. I mean, most businesses, small or medium, typically are operating with pretty tight margins, and so the kinds of additional investments that are required for PPE, for extra cleaning, for extra staff time to engage in the extra cleaning and the slowdown of customers coming in and out and the reduction in capacity. All of those things push businesses much closer to their margins. And many of those things are upfront costs. So that's why we're trying to support businesses with those upfront costs with respect to the two grants that we're proposing, $5,000 for basically sort of capital improvements and either $5,000 or $10,000 for inventory or operational upfront costs, as well as a meaningful rent relief program. And, on the rent relief piece, remember, we've been talking about this for weeks and weeks now. Alberta is one of the few provinces that has virtually no regulation around commercial leases. And we don't have a ban, as has been identified, on evictions, nor have we provided any kind of actual support for utilities or subsidy for rent. And so I think that if we can get a handle on those big items, rent and utilities and insurance, for a period of time, and then supplement that with some subsidies with respect to upfront costs, then I think you're going to provide, there will be the level of support there to help a lot of businesses. Maybe not all, but many. But the investment that we are talking about here, when all in, is less than the investment that we saw for the Trans-Canada Pipeline, the Keystone Pipeline. And I think that when you look at how many Albertans are supported by these small businesses, we need to be thinking about how we support those players in our economy who also support people and who also provide services we all want to see maintained, and who also provide really critical diversification efforts to the Alberta economy as a whole.
Okay, thanks so much.
Thank you. We'll go to our next caller. Catherine Grikowski of Alberta Today. Go ahead, your line is open.
Yeah, Catherine Grikowski of Alberta Today here. This question is for the NDP leader. I'm wondering how you came up with that dollar amount, that $5,000 for physical business improvements, the $10,000 for startup cost for the hospitality sector. How did you come up with that number?
Right. So as I said, it was $5,000 for potential infrastructure and capital costs, and then $5,000 for startup costs as either in terms of inventory or operating, and then or unless you were in hospitality, in which case it would be $10,000 instead of $5,000. And so, I mean, we came up with that after consulting with hundreds of small business owners. And so, is it exact and perfect? No. But does it address sort of the tranches, the general demands that we heard described to us over and over and over again by the hundreds of small business owners that we've been meeting with over the last 3 weeks? Yes. It was basically capital, and then startup operating, and then two significant differences in terms of your business model. So again, with the inventory and the risk associated with investing in that inventory. So, you know, it might easily be improved upon or refined, but to be clear, and then of course that's to be also paired with real rent assistance, because that is probably the single biggest thing we have heard from businesses across the board. And let us be clear, they've gotten no support on rent yet in this province. And the other piece is utilities, which again, all they've gotten is deferred debt, and insurance, which is a huge operating cost. So those things have been quite consistent across the board.
Do you have a follow-up, Catherine?
Yeah, maybe for either Brittany or Janis. The government just launched this new BizConnect website yesterday, including the bizconnect@gov.ab.ca email address. I'm wondering if either of you have tried that email address yet?
My partner had some questions about relaunching summer camps in person, and I know he emailed in yesterday, but I'm not sure if he's gotten a response yet.
I was not familiar with that launch, so I have not.
Thanks. So we'll report back to you on how that worked. You guys can let us know.
Thank you. We'll go to our next caller. Go ahead. Your line is open.
Hi there, it's Janet French from CBC. I just have a couple questions for both our business owners. First of all, do you feel confident that you know where to source and what personal protective equipment to buy should you reopen? Like, do you know if you feel like you know where to buy it, how much to buy, and what's going to be protective enough for any employees or patrons you might have?
Start with Brittany and then to Janis.
Yeah, no, I don't know where to source it at all. Even on a personal level, I'm trying to just get masks for myself, and they're very hard to find. So no, the guidelines aren't sufficient. They're leaving a lot of questions, especially with us. You know, we're dealing with lots of children and groups of people, so we want to make sure our customers and our team and our staff are absolutely safe and happy to be here. So that's going to be a big question for us in the upcoming weeks.
Janis?
I definitely do not. And as a phase 3 business, provided I don't apply to upgrade that to phase 2, I don't even know if I need it. So it's a little bit unclear on whether people would want to even come into a space and exercise with an instructor or they themselves in a mask. And it's unclear what the mask requirements would be. You know, do we need N95s? Is that even safe? Or you know, are cloth masks fine, et cetera? So no, I don't feel like it. No.
Thanks. Janet, did you have a follow-up?
Yeah, it's sort of unrelated. I wondered just if we have these proposed grant amounts that are $5,000 or $10,000, can our business owners give us some perspective on what kinds of costs they're paying maybe monthly in liability insurance, utilities, and rent?
Brittany, did you want to start?
I have to do some math here. So for utilities, rent, and sorry, what was the last one?
Insurance.
Liability insurance.
Per location, we're probably at like, I don't know, roughly off the top of my head, like 30 grand for those things.
Per month?
Oh yeah, sorry, per month, per location, in that ballpark.
Janis?
I actually would prefer to not disclose my rent, but I am mandated by my lease terms to have a $5 million corporate liability insurance. And basically that's over and above my personal practitioner insurance. So what that actually fundamentally means is that anybody who is in that space, if they fell down in a public space, such as the restroom, could technically they could issue a lawsuit against both me and the landlord. So that has had to be maintained. I have kept my own personal liability insurance as well. I actually don't recall what that costs me. I should know that, but I don't. And in terms of utilities, it's actually because I rent from a large landlord. So they fold it into our lease and then do a reconciliation once a year. So our reconciliation won't happen until 2021. And so I don't see it as a separate cost. It's part of my quote unquote rent that's paid. And we haven't had any adjustment in that. So in that is our property tax, our water, our electricity, all that stuff. So again, I wouldn't be able to really break that out as a specific number that has any meaningful information for you.
Thank you. We'll go to our next caller. Go ahead, your line is open. Oops. Go ahead, caller, your line is open.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me? Oh, okay, great. I guess my questions would be for either Janis or Brittany. I guess in terms of businesses, does it almost feel like for both of you that you're almost starting from scratch again, like almost like it's a brand new startup?
Yes, absolutely. But with less resources and way more stress than I've ever imagined, and a much tighter timeline. But it absolutely feels like we're starting from scratch again.
I agree.
Okay, and
if
sorry,
I had to start a business from this financial position in this climate, I quite frankly wouldn't do it. A lot of my own personal resources are sitting in that business, and we do that with kind of an expectation of return, but not ever kind of a expectation that we would have a large gap where we earn zero to a very low revenue period. And I'm coming into this as just me, but like Brittany, I was kind of sitting right at that, March, April, May are typically the peak of the year for me. So I've been closed during my peak season, and now we're coming into, quite frankly, even if I could open tomorrow, this is now the lowest period of the year. So would I choose to open a business in July? No, definitely not, given what I do.
Thank you.
Fair enough.
Did you have a follow-up?
Yeah, I do. This one would be more for Miss Notley. And I guess when you were talking about the $10,000 amount specifically for hospitality-related businesses, is that, I guess when we think about it, at least in March when these public health orders started coming down, they said like for restaurants, hotels, and the like, they had to completely shut their doors. So is that probably why their amounts would be a little bit higher in this plan?
Would absolutely be the case, because in a lot of cases you're looking at inventory that doesn't survive the shutdown, and so they need to make a bigger upfront investment than some other businesses. In some forms of retail, the product is still there when they reopen, but that's not the case, for instance, in restaurants. So that was basically what we were getting at there, trying to deal with the different nature of their inventory. So you'd be looking at a total of 10 for a regular small business, and then 15 for a restaurant, for instance, in addition to what we're asking the government to consider with respect to insurance reduction, utility rebates or grants, and support for rent.
Thank you. We'll go to our next caller. Michelle, your line is open.
Oh, hi there. My first question is for Rachel. I'm wondering if have you had a chance to look at the business guidelines that have been released by the provincial government? And if so, I mean, what's your sense of them? Do you think that they're going to be helpful enough to guide businesses through this period of reopening?
Well, unfortunately, my very strong impression of what happened here is that the UCP cabinet set a date for reopening, and then the public service was forced to scramble after the fact to put together guidelines. You may recall that late last week, the first answer from the Premier was that there would not be sector-specific guidelines, and then there was scrambling to create them. So they need to be seen from within that context. But nonetheless, I would suggest that they're not specific enough yet. They leave a lot of questions unanswered. It's not clear what is a recommendation versus what is a requirement. And that's really important for businesses that are literally considering these kinds of upfront investments in order to maintain safety. And so that's why you would have wanted to see something that was more specific, like what you've seen in other jurisdictions. So I would suggest that and the fact that, I mean, there was really no consultation in advance. They're trying to, again, scramble after the fact to consult. And they're scrambling after the fact saying, oh, hey, if you have more suggestions, email us. Well, thanks, but, if that's the situation, maybe we shouldn't be opening in 2 days. Not to mention the fact, again, that some of the things that are in there as possible shoulds cannot be executed within the 48 hours that they were given by this UCP government. So all in all, it's not confidence instilling, and Albertans need to see better from their government. I know that our public service has the capacity to provide that kind of evidence-based support to businesses, but they need to be given the time to do so.
And as a follow-up, I was quite interested in Janis's comment that, that she's getting information by press release. And I'm wondering, Rachel, I mean, do you have a sense that the government can do more for these businesses in terms of providing resources and information to them?
I think they absolutely can. I mean, we called last week when we were just talking about the issue of increasing the level of guidance. That was 2 weeks ago that when we were calling on the government to give more sector-specific guidance, was we actually asked that they set up sector-specific task forces and pull representative and/or random businesses to the table to hear from them. And then, of course, through that, you would also then find a good way to be communicating with them more effectively. And certainly what we've heard from business owners is that they are not getting clear direction. And it very much depends. So, you'll have some business owners that are happily part of a professional organization or a professional association. And so they're getting support and guidance from their professional association. But many, many, many small business owners do not fall within that category. And so they're still looking for information. And so the whole manner of communicating with these critical partners and stakeholders in our economic relaunch needs to be improved considerably. That'd be a great job for the, Central Communications Agency of the Government of Alberta.
Thank you. We'll go to our next caller. Go ahead, Dean. Your line's open.
Thanks. Yeah, hi, Rachel. Just to follow up on the food service, what are you hearing from restaurant operators and food service people? You've already addressed quite a bit of it, but are you hearing any other unique concerns, and do you see a lot of them opening on Thursday?
I guess we'll see. I think it will depend very much that between restaurants, different restaurants have different business models, and we know that. And some of them peak in the summer, some of them have, different customer bases, and depending on that, they'll make different decisions. Certainly, what we've heard, though, of course, is that the current upfront costs with respect to inventory and staffing and their business model in terms of whether or not 50% capacity will provide them with enough revenue to justify reopening means that several will not reopen. Certainly, I can think of a couple of restaurants in my neighborhood that I'm a big fan of that have said that they won't reopen. They'll continue to do curbside pickup. And that's fine. I mean, businesses are going to make the decisions that they need to make. But, as I said before, over a third of Albertans are employed in Alberta's small businesses. And so we need this government to take a very dedicated, focused, thoughtful approach to how they can support these small businesses as they move to reopening. Because, as I say, we need the services they provide, and the folks that work for them need their jobs.
Thanks. Just as a follow-up, when you went through the guidelines, there's a lot of shoulds and we'd like to sees and that sort of thing. Is this going to put some business owners in liability jeopardy here? They're trying to reopen. Are they opening themselves up to some lawsuits if people get COVID on their premises?
Well, it's been a long time since I've worn my lawyer hat, and so I'm not going to wear my lawyer hat. But there's no question that what you see, if you were to be looking at those guidelines from the perspective of defending a suit because somebody got sick at your establishment, those guidelines would not be particularly helpful because they're still pretty vague. And as we know, and I'm going to pivot here a little bit, but this is the other big concern we have. As we know from the profound failure of even clear rules to be followed in the case of cargo and in other meatpacking settings, because we know of that, we know that that clarity is absolutely important in order for people to be able to follow the rules. And any lack of clarity is going to lead to misunderstanding and different standards, and ultimately a whole lot of chaos. And that will be on the people whose job it is to make the rules, which falls squarely at the feet of this UCP cabinet.
Thanks, everyone. That's all the time we have for today.
Thank you.